So one of the pieces of data that I did have available to me in my class was what's called an item analysis. And so an item analysis gave me three pieces of information. One is, what is the percentage of students that got a particular item correct? So I had 100 students in my class, and if the difficulty of the item came back is 90%, it's a pretty easy item. 90% of my 100 students, or 90 out of my 100 students, got that question correct. So I could know that the students, based on reading, so these were reading check quizzes, could get that material on their own. I really didn't need to do a mini lecture or application activity on that particular concept. But I really looked for items between 30 and 60%. So some of the class was getting it, but most of them weren't. So I tried to target those particular items and say, did I just write a bad item and it was confusing? Or were the students really misunderstanding the concept? So I used that as an opportunity to re-instruct or to look at the quality of the item itself. And so we would go more in depth. I would go over the question with my students in class and then find out where their misconceptions were or misunderstandings were about that concept. And then if less than 30% of the class got an item correct, I either completely missed the point, the concept was too hard for them to get based on their reading assignment, or that it was a really bad question, and oftentimes the question was sometimes confusing, or there was another answer choice where they thought both of them were correct. And so those items clearly to me needed further investigation and conversation with the students. And so that was one piece of information that I was able to use and just quickly look at what percentage of the students got the item correct or incorrect. And another piece of information that you get from an item analysis is how well the item is working, to discriminate between the students that really know the material, so they're getting 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on the quiz, versus those students that don't know the material overall. They're getting low scores overall in the quiz. And so ideally, an item should, the students that know material, they should be the ones getting them correct, and the students that don't know the material should be the ones getting the item wrong. And so that can be done also, we have a scanning service that provides that data, or it can also be actually calculated in an Excel spreadsheet. And so you want items that positively discriminate between your strong and weak students. So I was able to tell those items that were working well to discriminate, and those that weren't. And those that weren't, meaning my weaker students, were the ones getting it right. Were they just guessing? Was it a confusing item? Was there an answer choice where the stronger students were actually picking it compared to the students who didn't do so well on that quiz? And so that was the second piece of information that I could get. And then the last piece of information was just a distribution of which students selected each of the answer choices. So I had 5 answer choices. If the correct answer was A, I would hope that of my 100 students, 70% or 70 of them would have selected the correct answer choice. But if, let's say, a 30% chose option E, was that a good distractor? Was that a common misunderstanding? So even though 70% of the students got the item right, if the other 30% chose only one of the other answer choices, maybe that's a misunderstanding that I need to address. And I've got a third of my class that's thinking the wrong concept. So even though it didn't fall in the problem question in terms of its difficulty, it's still an item that I would need to think about addressing that particular misconception with my students, versus an item where 70% got their item correct and the other 4 answer choices were an equal distribution, meaning students just didn't know the concept if they didn't get it right. And so that's, the item actually worked well and there were no particular misconceptions I needed to address. So all of that information not only told me how well the quiz was working, but where students actually, what concepts they were getting, what concepts they weren't getting, and then where their misconceptions actually were in terms of which of the incorrect answer choices that they were choosing. Since I taught a class of 100 students, for me, I used our scanning services, so I used bubble sheets with answer choices that could be scanned, and then part of that service is providing reports that give me the feedback about how the difficulty of the items, how well they discriminated, and then the frequency distributions of the answer choices. But with smaller classes, if I taught a class of 30 students, I probably would be able to calculate the percentage correct on each of the items for such a short quiz, and then quickly look at the frequency distributions just by doing counts. Even if I just had students fill out the quiz on a paper form rather than bubble sheets. And then the discrimination is a little bit more complicated formula, but it is something, any of these could be done with an Excel spreadsheet, or just looking at response patterns to a small number of students with a small number of questions can easily be done just by scanning the raw data that you have from the students' quizzes.